On this transmission special, we get the scoop on the upcoming book, The Art and Making of the Transformers War for Cybertron Trilogy, a perfect companion to the Netflix series. Author Mike Avila and showrunner F.J. DeSanto sit down to tell us all about it. Welcome to a very special Transmissions podcast episode. We are talking to F.J. DeSanto and Mike Avila from Transformers War for Cybertron Trilogy on Netflix. And they produced the book, The Art and Making of the Transformers War for Cybertron Trilogy. So it's great to see this. This goes into all the origins and the backstory, how this show came to be, and then everything that goes a deep dive into everything that happened in the show, and all the behind the scenes for all of us diehard Transformers fans. So it's a great great companion piece to the Netflix series that we thoroughly enjoyed watching for the last couple of years. So FJ and Mike, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
To be back.
Yeah. So FJ, we talked to you several times after each I think we did an interview after each installment in the War for Cybertron trilogy. So it's great to see everything collected into this book here. So I guess for both you and for Mike, how did the book come together in terms of what was the impetus behind putting this together and providing this kind of companion to the fans?
I begged Mike to do it. That's basically the version of it.
And I had no work, and I said, "Sure, I'll do it."
It was to be honest, it was a pipe dream to have something like this for it. Like, I grew up loving art of and making of books. I still collect them for all the movies and shows that I like, even shows that I don't like. I just love the process and seeing how they develop. And I kept saying halfway jokingly throughout the entire thing, like, this would look cool in a making of book. And I would say to Hasbro, like, making of book or art of book, blah, blah, blah. And then I'll let Mike sort of tell the story how we came. Mike and I have been friends for ages. So we've spent many years nerding out over things and, many meals and drinks and stuff like that. And I just said to him, Mike had a track record now of doing these really cool books. And I literally just said, like, why don't you do a book based on this? And I'll let Mike sort of pick it up from there.
I mean, it was really just like that. It was a casual conversation. We talked about it. And then I said, pitch the idea to Hasbro. If they dig it, then I'd love to do it. Because I had started watching the show, and thankfully I liked it. It would have been really an awkward conversation with my pal here if I hated it. Oh, no, I'm really busy. But everything really aligned quickly. I was actually without any work then, because the pandemic had killed all the work I was doing for people like Sci-Fi. Wasn't traveling anywhere because of the pandemic. And so I was thinking, okay, I was starting to line up little projects here and there. But I had just finished one book, and another book I was doing was delayed. And it turned out it was delayed just enough time that it gave me a several-month window that I didn't have anything to do. And this came, and I had no idea if it would line up, and usually it wouldn't. But FJ followed up with Hasbro immediately. They said, yeah, that's a great idea. And so I sent the pitch in. And then I remember my editor for the book, Amanda Ng, reached out to me, I think within a month of that conversation, maybe 6 weeks. And then it was rocking and rolling and ready to go.
It went really
quick. Like crazy, because then the deadlines that we had to try to meet to get the book printed in a timely schedule, hey, Matilda, fit right into the window of the time that the other book that I had signed on to do was delayed. And so I'm sitting there writing like a crazy person doing it. And it just really worked out very well. Now, the funny thing is, literally right after I signed the contract with Visme to do the book, all of a sudden I had a ton of other freelance work doing, because I'm a freelancer. I do, TV producing, writing for other sites and blah, blah, blah. And all this. So all of a sudden I'm doing this book thinking it's the only project I have. And then I have like 5 things land on my desk, which I can't say no to because I got 2 kids, and kids are expensive, and can't say no to work. And that was it. But honestly, it was a lot of fun because I really enjoyed the show. And I hadn't really been into Transformers in a while. I'm an old school G1 guy. So I really enjoyed the show, writing about it. Plus, I'll say this to everybody listening to the podcast. If you get a chance to work with a friend, always do it. Because unless they're assholes, it'll be a really rewarding experience. And FJ isn't an asshole.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Some would argue.
Well,
Some would argue.
So Mike, since you, I mean, you weren't involved with the production of the show, so how did you collect and get all the information for the book? Was it just with FJ, or did you have to go talk to lots of the producers and the people who produced the show? And like, how many people did you talk to and collect information from?
I mean, I talked to almost 20 people for this. One thing I've learned from doing a few of these is a certain plan of attack. And the first thing you want to figure out that list of people you want to talk to. It's always good to start at the top. With TV shows, it's different than film. Film, eventually, the most important people on a film will be the director, the production designers, and at least one of the producers, right? There's so many writers now in big Hollywood movies that they don't even remember what draft they wrote something that kind of made it on. But with a TV show, the producers and the showrunner are vastly important because they're overseeing everything, and so they have a great broad knowledge that can give you the structure of the story that you want to kind of fill in with details. I had the added advantage of being friends with FJ, so if I needed follow-ups, I could do it quite easily. And then he introduced me to Matt Murray, his number 2 on the show, and Matt was fantastic because Matt remembers all the great details that old guys like FJ will forget, due to their gray hair and all the other nonsense. And so that was hugely important because there's a lot of detail in the show. And if you're not blessed with a biblical knowledge of the Transformers mythos, it helps to have people who are in the weeds on it. But the writers in the show too were really helpful because I found out as I was going through the process how helpful they were to the process of the show because they each brought their own strengths and knowledge. I mean, I'm sure you guys know Tim and Gavin and May and Brandon, they're all Transformers uber nerds.
Yep.
And that was incredibly helpful. I think I talked to May for like 2 hours. And it was like I just got in a crash course in Beast Warsosity. And it was awesome because it helped provide context. You guys all know what happened in the episodes. I'm sure you watched them 1, 2, 3, 5 times. So my job is to try to provide some context for that part of the story, and then to show how the sausage is made, and to find and unearth the interesting details that'll say, money well spent. Because I know what it's like to buy one of these books, and I'm like, oh, really? That kind of sucks. I brought this up earlier in another interview. Somebody got mad about my Aquaman book in an Amazon review and said, there are no images from the book. I bought this because I love the movie and there are no images from the book. Why would you spend 30, 40 bucks on a making of book just to see the same screenshot images you can get off your DVD or Blu-ray, right? You guys want to see the stuff that didn't make air, right? You want to see the toy images, whatnot. And that was a great thing to me. And it was a really fun part to work on because I think with this book, I spent more time focused on the design than I have in previous books because there was so much great stuff to work with, from the toy shots and the packaging art to all the great concept art, which FJ knows this. I spend more time thinking about original art than I do anything else. So to get a chance to have access to all the great sketches and drawings and all the previs stuff that went into making the show, man, I figured other people would be interested in it too.
Yeah,
Definitely.
I was flipping through the review, like the galley that we were given, and just you have so much of those sketches and things, and it's really nice to see how like a particular scene comes together from like the storyboards, and I really like how you did that. There's so many images in here.
I mean, there was tons of stuff I hadn't even seen. Like when we were getting stuff from Polygon, I was saying, where the hell was this? You never now it's all stuck on my hard drive somewhere, which now someone from Hasbro probably just mug me for my computer tomorrow. But
Did you have a lot of stuff that you just had to leave out for time and space?
what, in the show or the book?
Well, in the book.
Oh yeah, the book could have been a 500. Honestly, if I would have done this via Kickstarter, for example, and convinced Hasbro to let me do it, I would have done a 500-page art book with little blurbs, because the art in the show is beautiful, and I mean art in the show, I mean everything, including the packaging art for the toys that Hasbro did, which is fantastic, and that I'm as interested in as I am in anything else. And I don't even collect Transformers toys much. I like 1 and 2 to have around, but that's it. But I always love packaging art. There's just dozens and dozens of great images that we just didn't have room for. But so that was the balance. And the stuff from Polygon and all the background stuff. Oh man, you kidding me? All the stuff that they built to fulfill the vision that FJ and his team had for like the Cybertron Society, that you don't even see really in the show, but is referenced and hinted at and seen in the rubble. That could have made its own book. Like there's just a lot of stuff there. So we snuck in a few of those, you know, and I tried to, a lot of the information that didn't have space for in the text there, I used it to fill in some of the photo captions, because there was just a lot of great detail. Talking with the animators too, they were really helpful about sharing all the great detail that went into how they approached it and the things that they thought about as they were coming up with images and designing, you know, the arena, which they made. One of the animators told me that they looked at there's a train line. FJ, you know this because you've been to Japan multiple times. I've never been. There's a train line that circles the city, and they wanted the arena to basically be like that's the circumference of it. I sucked in math. I was an English guy, but I think that was the word that they used. Okay, like that's the kind of detail that went into it. And then they came prepared with the exact measurements too.
Oh wow.
Yeah, because like they said, FJ always kept saying scale, scale, scale. That was his obsession, along with the mercenaries. So they were ready for me when I was talking to them to give me the exact numbers of how they came up with the scale for certain characters and buildings and things like that.
Oh, that's awesome.
I'm a scale queen, I guess. That's
Come on, I just set you up for the mercenaries. Jump right into it. That's
they know. Look, anybody who's listened to this podcast has heard me ad nauseum about the mercenaries. Like, there's, unless there's a question, I'm not going to torture them any more than I have already. These guys have been through it. They've been through it with me on this. But the scale stuff, you know, to be honest, and I'm glad it's in the book, was, you know, and I don't know if I ever said this on the podcast. If I did, you can shut me up. Is, you know, each series, each season had its own specific scale. You know, like we'd sit there and be like, we wanted Cybertron to be this humongous place that dwarfed the characters. So like, even if you have the theater and all that stuff, like it was and then in you know, that it was scaled for them to live in. But then when you got to space, it was even bigger. And then when you got to Earth, you know, in Earthrise, they were bigger than trees and stuff like, you know, like we played around with that. That was all intentional. Like I wanted a scope to it. Like I didn't want it to feel small, if that made sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, in addition, like not just like physical scale, but also temporal scale. Like I noticed going through the book, there's a timeline you know, in the book about it, like what, you know, how, when the events take place, and you've blown it out to like hundreds of millions of years. So it's
Hasbro did all that.
Oh really?
So
okay.
You know, when I first started working with Hasbro, I don't know if I've ever said this before talking to you guys. When I first started working with Hasbro, we were doing Prime Wars. They didn't have any sort of sense of the franchise and the multiverse and all that stuff. And by the time we got around to War for Cybertron, they had like a deck that was sort of like, here are the analogs of the characters, here's the history of the franchise, here's the thing that anybody who was working on the franchise could work off of, and it would be consistent. And one of the interesting things was a variation of that timeline, where it's a much in the brand deck, and sort of the top secret Hasbro thing is a much larger, like, here's how every series fits in. So like in their minds, which I don't even necessarily agree with, but in their minds, G1 is the start, and Prime Wars Trilogy was the end of G1. Right? Like that was their idea, was like that was the end of G1, and then everything sort of fit in between. So we actually, because what really got tricky was they wanted the timeline. I didn't care about the timeline because I was dealing with a specific thing, but for them to understand Beast Wars in particular, because this show screwed everything up in terms of their timeline. So the idea was like, you started here, you went to here, and then you went all the way back to here. And it was like, in my mind, it was like, no. But they sort of went and sort of, after they had the scripts and seen the majority of the show, sort of came back with the timeline you see in the book. They're like, we had to argue over sort of where Beast Wars was, where was original Beast Wars versus this, Beast Wars versus Kingdom, like where did that all fit in the multiverse and all that stuff? Like, what is the timeline of that? Like, when are the Maximals and Predacons? Like, how far away is that? Before they travel back. There was all kinds of like back and forth. And those were, to be quite frank, no pun intended, that I would have to sit there and just be like, you guys figure that out. It's your franchise. Like, I'm not going to sit here and argue this shit. You know what I mean? Yeah. Because my job is just to tell the story. Like, I'm not sitting there like, because that there's that, what was problematic for them was that one cold open, I forget which episode in Kingdom, where it's the flashback of them stealing the golden disc, that like screwed them up. Like, they were just like, when is that? And I'm just like, I don't know, like, I don't know when the hell it's going to be. My job is just to convey the story of the importance of the golden disc and why Beast Wars Megatron has stolen it. And, and we had all this fertile terrain of figuring out what's on the golden disc. So, that was the beauty of Beast Wars never being finished, was we could sort of play around with all that stuff in a way that before. Sorry, this is my maximal right here.
Hey, you guys want to know the only time there was any sort of hint of drama in the process of making this book was when I text him and I go, hey, we got to talk about the timeline and the whole multiverse thing. What's going on here? And he goes, uh-oh. He gets another call and he goes, okay, here's the thing. And then 20 minutes later, he still hasn't explained it to me, just danced around it. And I go, dude, I'm more confused now than ever. And so he goes, okay, you got to call Matt Murray. And so I had to call Matt. And then he walked me through it, and it's like, and then FJ again tells me, essentially FJ punted it to Matt because he says,
my brain can't handle at a certain point when
his brain couldn't handle it, and he said at a certain point, I just got to worry about getting my show done, not about the long-standing damage I'm doing to the timeline. And then Matt Murray, very smartly tells me, he goes, look, ultimately, in my mind, and I put this in the book, the moment the Allspark is sent, is flung by Optimus, that's when the divergence happens, and that's when the Transformers multiverse.
No, it's the dead universe. That's
the quote is in the book. That's what you say. See, that's what I mean. Like, there's different instances here, but it speaks to it about that being such a big moment, right? And it's like, I remember at first when I told him we got to talk about this in the book, and he goes, "Do we really have to?" And I go, "Yeah, you gotta have to, because it's a big deal. You brought G1 and Beast Wars together. It's clearly a timeline, kerfluffle. So
I can't wait to read the book now. This will all be new to me. This is very exciting.
There you go."
By the way, that's Hasbro's fault, because I didn't come up with the idea of the third act being Kingdom. Like, I'm sure I've told you guys this before. There were multiple times where I'd sit there and be like, guys, I'm not the one who thought of this. Like, this is you're the ones who wanted the Beast Wars and G1 characters to meet. Like, it's not my fault that completely contradicts the G1 and the Beast Wars series. And they'd be like, oh, you're right. Like that kind of thing. But could you do this? No, I can't do what you asked, because that happened 12 times in, 1992 or something like that. Like, and I'm not doing it again. Like, it doesn't service the story. It's like how they wanted the show to end. I guess I'm sure I've told you this too. They wanted the show ending with Optimus going to Earth to start G1. And I was sitting there going, guys, I just spent 12 of the 18 episodes of him trying to get back to Cybertron. He's not leaving. He can leave next week and somebody else can tell that story. That kind of thing. Like, your timelines don't mean jack to me at a certain point, beyond the timeline I'm establishing that, by the way, you gave the mandates to. Like,
It's
they eventually
kind,
relented. They were good with it, but
I mean, it's kind of I don't know, crazy to try to fit every single Transformer story within one continuity. I mean,
they were obsessed with it ending with G1. They were obsessed with it, and Gordon in particular. And I'd have to push back on it. There were two things they were obsessed with, right? I don't know if any of this is in the book, because probably not, because I'm throwing them under the bus. Is they wanted desperately, before we got to Kingdom, they wanted the G1 characters to land in Portland, Oregon in 1984 or 6, whatever the hell it was, and get the Earth modes, and then go to Beast Wars, right? So it's like, dude, I have 6 episodes, and you want me to build Earth in 1986 just to do this? Like, I can't do it. I can't pull it off. And that leads to the Earth mode story that's in the book about Optimus and all that stuff, which I've told you guys before. But like that was their one thing, which was like, they got to go to Portland, Oregon, and they've got to and it's got to end on G1. And by the way, if you look at all the packaging art for Earthrise, it's all Portland, Oregon. Like that was like their like passive aggressive way. Like if you look at them, they're like in forests and stuff. That was like their passive aggressive way of saying, could you do that? Because like, hey, we've already established this. And I'm like, no, like that's not going to happen. Like I need to, like, because you're underserving the Beast Wars characters. And like I got to focus on those guys from the very first episode of Kingdom.
Yeah. I mean, I would have said give you more episodes, but I don't know why they limited you so much to 6 episodes per series.
The problem is, in retrospect and based on the performance of the show probably would have been served better if it was 2 9-episode seasons. And Earthrise was just like sort of like a couple episodes in between, because the show did really well. Then it dropped for Earthrise, but then it jumped back up for Kingdom because of the interest in the characters. But the problem is, and this is the blessing and the curse, was it was Hasbro that wanted the 3-chapter thing to go with the toy line. So Netflix agreed to that. They didn't have to, but they did. So, and when they agree to that, you don't know your episode count at that point. Like I was fighting, for 8 to 10 for each, and they're just like, we don't have the money for that. Like then it's cost prohibitive, and well, I can't really argue. So I got to figure out how to do this. I just went through this on Tekken, which came out last week, which is also 6 episodes, which was a nightmare. Like I'm watching it, and again, Gavin wrote that show, and that's why Gavin's not on Kingdom, because I took him and put him on Tekken for us. And you're sitting there going, oh, I wish I had 4 more episodes of this. And I'm like emailing Netflix, like, you should have given me 4 more episodes. And they're just like, yeah.
By the way, in the book, we do, I did my best to try to explain why they're in like Ecuador and what would become Tibet, in Kingdom, but then they wind up in Portland. Like the idea was, and this is part of the deck, was that Earth was one giant supercontinent there, so they had much less ground to cover. So Tibet was much closer to Oregon. Hey, look, we got to work with what we have. Okay.
Yeah.
But there's some really good images in there that kind of lay out the topography of Kingdom and where it relates to Portland, because they did want the consistency there.
Yeah, I did notice that. That's that's awesome.
I mean, those are things we can do when we know in advance. Like, well, it's got to be Ecuador. All right, we'll figure out what was Ecuador like at that particular, and of course you take creative liberties with it, but you at least sat there and we didn't put it in, Portland, Oregon, so in 1997, like that kind of thing. It's just like we try to stay true to this stuff, but there's a certain limit. Like again with the timeline, it's like, unless it directly impacts the show in some immediate nature, I ain't got time to think about that stuff. Canon, yes, always canon, but I defer to the writers who were, as you guys, I mean, I think the majority of the writers have been on your show. And Matt was on at one point with me, is, everybody loves the franchise enough where some of that stuff is automatically protected, or sort of it's inherent in the language we speak when creating the show. And I think the book really does a good job of conveying that. Like, I'm super excited. Mike has a hard copy, as you can see above his head. I don't even have a hard copy yet. I want to kill
I
him.
have two.
You have two?
Oh.
Wow.
God damn it. I don't even have the finished PDF. I have like a draft of it. But anyway, it'll be like Christmas when it shows up. I'll just disappear for like 2 days and read it. So
It turned out really nice. I think the designer
Biz did an incredible job. Like the
did
quality
a
of
really, really nice job.
the design is good. And and they gave us, look, you guys,
Look at Scorponok, man. Come on.
you guys know me
yeah.
well enough. It's like, that's the kind of shit you want to see, that I want to see, that our level of nerdiness, that our level of detail, and not some surfacey, just like, yeah, we had so much fun writing this. It's like Mike really went into like the minutia of it. And because we have such a good relationship, I was able to sit there and
Great toy.
wow.
and again, that was really important, was to feature the toys as much as possible too.
Yeah.
And and that was before like we announced the book. Like, it was like, we gotta have the toys in it. Like, without the toys, there's no show, right? So that was really important to us. And Mike did a really awesome job of sort of talking to everybody on every level.
So
It's
this
funny,
is one of my
that's all in there.
favorite
None of
parts.
that's in the show.
Yeah, see, this was one of my favorite additions in the book. That I was glad Hasbro, allowed us to use from their like in-house materials, the insignias and everything. And I'm like, that's kind of stuff that hopefully makes it worthwhile for Transformers fans to pick it up, because there's more than just the usual stuff. Then I think they get. There's so much great material in the Transformers property for books like this that it really became a choice of, okay, what can't we use, and how do we fit it all in there? And that's easier said than done. I'm telling you, one of the hardest aspects of one of these books is figuring out how to put the stuff in a cohesive way that reads well. And the designers did a really good job, I think, with this. And I worked on some books that we all went into it with the best of intention, didn't turn out quite the way we wanted it. This one I'm as happy with as any of the ones that I've done before.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, those insignias were something that I was not aware that every character had their own insignia. That was a really cool addition to the book that you showed there. That was,
It's on the toys. It was just, we made a decision not to use them because you'd have to like change all the different models and stuff like that. We just decided, like, I don't know why it was just too much. But it's so cool that it's in the book, because you get to see the differences between the product versus the entertainment, as the brand people would say.
I remember Hasbro mentioning the insignias when they were announcing the toy line, but I didn't realize it was each character. Like, I thought it was just like rank type insignias.
Yeah.
So that's really cool.
Yeah.
So,
And by the way, that's how the mercenary thing happened, was they had designed all these logos and things like that. And they were just on like a slideshow in the office, just showing all these different things. And so much came out of that, like between the mercenary stuff, like Scorponok's logo, all that stuff, that all came out of one giant meeting. That initial meeting, that's where we decided to do Alita, that's where we decided to do mercenaries, all that stuff, that all came out of one giant meeting, where we got to see a lot of these things that you now see in the book that have never been shown before.
awesome.
very cool. Well, I think we're at time, so I don't know if we can go much longer, but I do want to thank you guys for talking to us. The art and making of the War for Cybertron trilogy, I believe the book comes out October 11th. So
Correctamundo.
Yeah, so everyone, if you can pre-order, I think you can probably pre-order it now on Amazon or anywhere else. And yeah, it'll be out just a couple of months, so check it out. Mike, anything else that you've been working on that you want to plug or talk about before we wrap things up?
Can't talk about my next book because it's unannounced. It's on a sci-fi show that's currently airing on television somewhere. I will plug my Wolverine book is back there. Wolverine Creating Marvel's Legendary Mutant. That was my most recent release. Quite happy with that one. It tells the entire comic book history of Wolverine, and believe me, that was harder than it sounds to put together.
Awesome. Yeah, Mike Avila, thanks for talking to us, and of course FJ DeSanto, the showrunner and producer of Transformers War for Cybertron trilogy. Anything you've got cooking up? You mentioned the Tekken series.
Tekken
Anything
came
else
out
going on?
last week, which
Okay.
started literally the same day as Transformers. So I was juggling both shows at the same time, Matt and I and Gavin. And I'm super excited with how it came out. It was a much tougher experience to make Tekken than it was Transformers, let's just say. Much more challenging doing a video game property versus an iconic toy property. That said, the show came out great. I'm super proud of it. And literally, I'm writing the pilot for the next show I'm doing, which I can't say yet, but it's for a big streamer that I haven't worked with yet. They got to green light it, but a pilot is happening. It's based on a comic book property. And that's keeping me busy. And then subsequently my work with Vault Comics on the producing side, live action side, things like that. We're setting things up, getting things made. And, as always, busy as hell.
And then you also have trade secrets for music side.
Yeah, no, of course the band. Yes, the single came out last week also. So I had a single and a show out last week. So there's a new single out. There's some remixes that are coming out this week and then the week after, which people don't know yet, through our friend Jim at Distortion Productions, who's my brother in arms and has taken very good care of me on the musical end.
Yeah. Shout out to Jimmers. Yep. All right. Well, thanks again to Mike Avila and FJ DeSanto. And this has been the Transmissions Podcast. And I'm Big C, and down there's Jeremy. We'll see you later.
Yeah, say hi to Daryl.
Thanks, guys. This was a lot of fun.
Thanks. Yeah.
Thanks, guys. It's always good to see you both.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Transmissions. If you'd like to join the conversation, travel to our Discord channel at transmissionspodcast.com/Discord. Want some cool transmission swag? Feast your eyes on our transmissions gear at transmissionspodcast.com/shop. If you'd like to support our podcast, go to transmissionspodcast.com/support or tell your friends about our show. We'll see you next time.